Thank you all for staying. How much does that movie rip? It's so good. Um, I hadn't seen it in theaters in like 6 years, and seeing it with such a great crowd was amazing. Thanks to Karyn. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you so much, everybody. It's really fun to be here.
Um, when we talked about this film in particular, and a little bit Jennifer's Body, you brought up John Dielman, and the Frida is doing a Chantal Akerman retrospective right now.
Oh, amazing.
So what's fascinating, and part of what you'll see in my book, is that a lot of films can influence films in ways that you don't expect. So you told a really interesting story about domesticity and how your characters behave at home influences how they how you think about them, much like John Dielman. So there was a scene in this film that sort of helped you and Nicole come up with this like feral character in the center that got cut.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I would love if you would share a bit about that cut scene and what it did to help you build the character with Nicole.
Yeah. I had said to Phil Hay and Matt Manfredi, who are the screenwriters and who I've worked with on 3 movies, but we have a company together and we try to make a lot of work together, and I'm married to Phil. When they were talking about this idea initially and telling me about the character, I just sort of, I casually asked, like, I wonder how, because they described her as so alone and lonely, kind of fundamentally. And I was like, oh, I wonder how she eats, you know, like when she's at home alone. And the description of her past, you know, sort of fighting for scraps with her brothers who were sort of abusive and weird. We'd shot some of those scenes too, and they didn't end up in the finished film. But we had a scene where she was already on the path to trying to track down Silas, and we learn later eventually murder him. But we had a scene where she had some food in front of her, and we were just sort of slowly tracking over the table toward her, and it was like she was protecting the food from an unseen thief.
Yeah.
And that really helped Nicole understand that she always feels like there's somebody, this character always feels like someone's breathing down her neck.
I loved that story because my mom always says I eat like a badger. And I do think that how you eat really reflects who you are as a person. And just picturing her like,
yeah, she was just like
feral and,
shoveling food into her mouth.
I would love to see Nicole Kidman like doing that. I think this is one of her greatest performances. And I think you often pull these really singular performances from your actresses, no matter what genre you're directing. You've directed like all the genres pretty much. How do you start once you have your actor in that role? How do you sort of start crafting it with them? Like, what's the collaboration like?
In this case, it was a lot of conversation from the very beginning. Nicole had some questions about background and sort of family dynamics for the character, and then she takes influences and inspiration from all kinds of places. And I remember early, once she had signed on, there was just this interesting drone footage I had found of a pack of coyotes that were trapped in the Silver Lake Reservoir, and they were sort of just circling the reservoir, and you could kind of immediately, from watching the aerial footage, you could tell who the alpha was, you could tell who the runt was, who was going to get left behind. And I just said, I don't know why, but this makes me think about Erin Bell. And I sent it to her, and she was like, that's all I need. It helped her a lot to see that footage, yeah.
Speaking of the reservoir, I also love this movie because it shows like aspects of Los Angeles that I think we kind of take for granted. I think you filmed them beautifully. I particularly love the way you filmed the desert. I love the desert. Was that something as you were working on the script and Phil and Matt were working on the script, these sort of industrial wasteland parts of LA, was that something you were thinking of?
Yeah, I mean, I think LA is this sort of great misunderstood behemoth of an American city. And part of what really characterizes it for me, I've lived here now for over 20 years, is this mashup of industrial blight, a sense of extraction from the environment combined with almost uncanny beauty. You know, it's like the worse the smog is, the more beautiful the sun sets. And it's just like, that's such a hard thing to make sense of. But I felt like this was a movie that could really benefit from seeing the, I don't know, I want to say the like underbelly of Los Angeles, which is so vast. It felt like a fun opportunity to see in LA we don't get to see very often.
And it sort of is in this subgenre of noir that I love that I can't remember who first called it this. I think it was a BAM retrospective, maybe Sunshine Noir, where instead of the shadows, you have the harsh sunlight. And obviously the end of the film is the harshest of that.
Yeah, we talked about that a lot.
Were there any films that, as you were developing, you were thinking of in terms of either Sunshine Noir or even just the structure?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of structure, it's a little bit tough because we always knew that the structure was essentially a circle, and there aren't a ton of movies to pull from for that. But in terms of look, I mean, it's kind of impossible to make a noir, a crime thriller in Los Angeles and not think about Chinatown for me. And there is so much that happens along the LA River in this movie that it's hard not for me to think about Chinatown. And the idea of like perversity as part of some component sometimes of our essential character, whether it's lit up or not. But yeah, there were a lot of LA movies though that just had, you know, a sort of a grit to them, this sense of, I don't know, underbelly.
And a lot of your projects have these sort of, for lack of a better word, feral women. She's very feral. I think Jennifer and Jennifer's body unintentionally becomes feral. Yellow Jackets, feral women. I love Yellow Jackets. What do you think draws you to these sort of really wild women and the great emotions you get from that?
You know, it's funny. It's like I don't feel any shortage of reasons to be really troubled, deeply troubled, often trying to make space for like my rage at the world I live in, combined with my sense that I want to be constructive and I want to be better than just an expression of rage. And but I do feel like the world just keeps giving me reasons. So I'm interested in exploring, you know, what it looks like when women transgress, only because I do believe change is possible when we see that, when we experience it, when we reckon with the consequences. I never wanted her to simply, I never felt she was heroic. I felt she was the opposite of that, but I thought that was still a worthy and interesting thing to explore.
We also talked a bit about crime and punishment and the way that the philosophy in that novel sort of finds its way into Erin's circular journey. Can you talk a little bit about how you take something that's so different, like crime and punishment, and this, I don't think people would imagine, but it's there. The minute you said it, I was like, oh yeah.
Well, it's this interesting idea of the crime is the punishment, is the crime, is like the sense that once the crime is committed, once a crime is committed and you want to hide it or pretend it didn't happen or rationalize it or make excuses, it will haunt you forever. And so I was really interested in this idea that she's grappling with in the first half of the movie, it appears like she's looking for justice of some kind, but what she's really doing is moving closer to some kind of personal accountability, which we see essentially in some way costs her her life. But I thought that was a really, I don't know, there's something worthwhile about watching somebody be accountable for the wrongs that they've done.
I wanted to ask, watching it this time, because the last time I watched it at home, and it's, you know, not the same experience at all. The sound design in this movie is amazing. Both the music, the I don't even know what I'm thinking of, but there was like some sort of, at one point, almost a drum feeling. I don't know. I was really in it. At what point do you, when you're working on the edit, does the sound come in and sort of cement?
Sound, I work with the same editor, Plummy Tucker, on all of my work, or most of it, and she's sort of learned about editing in first of all on film, and she started in Peter Weir's cutting room,
wow.
and so
Okay.
I think sound
Casual.
was this like essential component alongside the picture to build and fill out and inform the picture. So she's always building the sound, and then we have a pretty good sense by the time our official sound team comes on of what we want to do. And then in terms of my composer, like we now for the past 3 projects, he writes the score or most of the score before I start shooting.
Wow.
And so then I'm, you know, that music is music I played in the makeup trailer for Nicole and Sebastian and Tatiana. And so everyone was hearing a feeling of the movie that they could understand was going to, I hope, expand the sense of what was happening off of the page.
I've never talked to a director that made the score first. I love that. I had a question off that, and it's gone because now I'm thinking about like being in the makeup room listening to the score that's going to be like a year later. I don't know. Let's open it up to audience questions because that's blown my mind. Do we have it truly did. That's amazing. Do we have the microphone?
Oh, there's someone.
It's back there. Okay. It's really bright. Does anyone have a question now that my mind's blown? Right back, all the way back. Yeah.
I have a question about the wig.
Yeah.
How did you come up with what Erin Bell ended up looking like, and was it different from what you imagined in the beginning?
It's so funny. It's like hair is so important to me, like and it was unfortunate in some ways because we had to fight the reality. Weirdly, what I really wanted was her hair to look, I mean, the hair on our head is dead, but I wanted her hair to look really dead. And
Wow.
And the way you do that is you get human hair and really use a high quality human hair wig. But in the case of this wig made of human hair, it was so damaged, so fragile, so crazy looking half the time. And so it was a little bit of work to make it completely work. I'm really into like shags on women, and I feel like it's a way to sort of take the movie outside of time a little bit, and just the whole thing with her hair, her makeup, creating the look between, you know, almost 20 years ago and then the look of her present day self. All of that took quite a bit of tests, and we were a very low budget movie, so it was not an easy thing to come up with how to do that on our schedule and with our budget. But you know, this is where we landed.
The shag definitely has like if Jane Fonda and Clute like never went home again.
Right. Yeah. She's meant to be somebody who doesn't get a trim. You know, she doesn't want to like lose those split ends.
Never showers.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel it.
Exactly. It was meant to be a vibe.
Do we have another right in the kind of middle here? Oh, wait, microphone. Oh, it's really bright light.
Her look was very consistent when she played her various characters. Did you film her in one look and then try to film her in another look because it looks so very consistent? And did that give a problem with her sort of being in the mood? Obviously, it worked fairly well, but did that have any problems there?
You know, that's an interesting question. I wished we could have, for instance, done the work from the past first, or the work of the present and then the past, but we just couldn't. The way the schedule was it was just, there's so many locations in the film, and we just had to go with like where we could most economically, sort of shoot and still make our days. We shot the film in 33 days, but we're in like 60 different locations, and so there were days when she would switch between the two looks and the two time periods, and I think it was really hard actually for her, because of course psychologically you're trying to sort of channel different frequencies, but she did a beautiful job considering.
And this was the first film that Nicole did after making her pledge to work with women directors consistently. She had in the past. And I would like to point out she has worked with 19 in, I believe, 8 years. So any actor who claims they can't, I don't know what they're doing. They're just not
lying
committed.
to themselves.
They're lying to themselves, yeah. And there's so many talented, amazing women making so many, like, this I think is one of the great neo-noirs, noirs, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's comparable to some of the great films from the 40s to now, in my opinion. Did you always was this always a genre you wanted to play in?
You know, noir wasn't actually something I thought a lot about. I mean, I studied it. I love a lot of film noir. I hadn't considered it until Phil and Matt had brought this story to me. And what I loved about the story, particularly as it relates to that circular narrative structure, was this idea that like two central tenets of a noir often end up being the detective and the femme fatale. And in the case of this film, this character is both. And that's so interesting to me that, you know, the existential questions that often come up in the best and the grittiest and the bleakest of film noir still manage to pit men and women in different camps somehow. Like a woman's seduction is a man's ruin. And in the case of this film, it's this woman's own greed, pettiness, you know, sort of envy, her own sense of smallness that drives her to these criminal acts, terrible choices that we watch her in some weird way investigate over the course of the film. And so it was kind of like she was investigating herself. You know, she was the criminal and she was the detective investigating herself.
That was the question I told everyone to think about. I hope now I think when you told me that, it made me rethink all the noirs that I liked, and like, could we flip it in some of those noirs? I don't know. I would think so. Do we have any other audience? Well, all the way back there, you were really insistent in the corner. That was like up.
My question is in regards to Nicole Kidman's character's relationship with Shelby. What was the thought process in that, or like, how important was it? Because you see, like, the only person she cares about really is herself, and maybe Chris is questionable, but you see like little seeds of her caring for Shelby until like the last thing she really thinks about at the end is Shelby and what she wanted to do for her. Like, what was the importance of that? Because it's like, it's so little, but at the same time it echoes in the story with her and Chris.
Thank you for that observation. I mean, I think that we have these ideas about being parents and being parented and feeling loved or neglected or betrayed or failed by, along with failing our own kids. And I just thought it was going to be really interesting to see. To me, there's a very powerful fantasy in being young and having your parents say, you're not actually the fucked up one. I am. Like, I personally think that would be a really interesting thing to hear from a parent.
Yeah.
And I think it can be very liberating, even though it's like painful and lacerating for Shelby in that moment. Maybe it's at least some shred of grace that Erin Bell is willing to show her, a sense of being accountable in this tiny way in this moment before she probably knows she's going to die. I just felt like that was an interesting thing to play with, like the concept of spiritual accountability.
I feel like we would all like our parents to acknowledge that they are probably the fucked up one. I feel that. Right, with the beard, I think, glasses.
Thanks so much for all your work and being here. And I loved like grittiness and sunshine noir we've talked about. It's like really beautifully executed and it's poetic at different times. But there's one moment when she's like at the fire with Silas, and it like there's like either overlapping dialogue or she's reflecting, and it could also though be like almost a psychedelic moment where like he's either reading her mind or they're having this like dialogue. If you could just talk about like that scene, and like it just stuck out to me, like this psychedelic moment almost in like an otherwise really realist, grounded film.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment, because to me that's the kind of work I want to do, that is wrestling with our depiction of reality, or this concept that there is reality and that it's sort of plain and mundane. But in fact, I think as we walk through life, we are struck with moments of fantasy and poetry and projection and dreams. And I was trying to get the audience closer to the way Erin Bell walks on this earth, where she's always flashing forward and flashing back to her mistakes, to her messed up version of justice. Like, that's how I walk down the street. That's how I putter around my house. That's how I am in my life. Like, I'm not always just sort of in the here and now. And I wanted to depict that in a way. And I don't always think I succeed, but that's the goal, is to try and sort of bring the audience to a psychological state that is not, I don't know, that wouldn't even dare to call itself realism, but would call it personal, emotional, psychological, spiritual.
Yeah, that was the scene I was thinking of when I was talking about the sound design, because it's the like, sometimes you can hear him talking, sometimes you can't. And I kind of feel like that's how a lot of people feel when they're having conversations, but we try to pretend that we don't feel that way, right? Like,
Yeah,
that's kind of what you're getting to.
It's really interesting because that
two brains.
scene was something that was scripted always as like a straight flashback. But I realized, like, we've just seen her like collapse on the floor, and it's more like a dream she's having of something that actually happened. And so there's that thing of the disjunctiveness of like feeling like in some ways she can read Silas's mind and he can read her mind, and that's awful because he's kind of petty and awful, and he sees in her a kindred small soul, and that bugs her for the rest of her life. And so I wanted to depict some of that like disjunctiveness.
I love that line Tatiana's character says, that like, you were doing your job, but you wanted it just as much as I did.
Oh, yeah.
And there's like the very thin line between a criminal and a cop.
Oh yeah. Well, oftentimes
we
no
know-
thin line at all.
We know that. And it's I love that this movie really lays that bare. Do we have any questions on that side? Oh, right here. Oh, right there.
Oh, thank you. You know, there's such a great history of LA bank robber movies, and I was really struck by how the present day bank robbery, you know, it's, you know, usually these are always very macho, mono things, but I was really struck by how, you know, everything is filtered through Nicole Kidman's perspective, and then you even do subtle subvert things like, you know, it's the male cop who gets shot, it's the only two women cops left, and it's the woman criminal that she chases down. I was just curious, like, what were your influences in shooting the bank scene?
You know, the Glendale Police Museum has, there's a museum dedicated to the police force in Glendale. And I went there and they have the entire newscast and drone footage of the Northridge bank robbery, which when you see it over the course of the time it took, and you see two regular people just armed as if they're in a militia with automatic weapons in a way that hadn't been done before. And it was interesting to see how chaotic it was and how messy and how much panic there was on the part of law enforcement, because the level of artillery was just unlike anything they had really had to deal with before. After that bank robbery, everything changed. But there were a couple of really interesting things that came through, which was like, there was one dispatch operator, a very competent woman on the line who kept everyone as safe as they could be with as much information as possible, given the circumstances that they found themselves, like literally having to run out to get more ammunition in the middle of a firefight with two guys. And that, she was talking them through in this way that was like, huh, that's such an interesting perspective that we haven't really had of that bank robbery and of bank robberies generally, that there's this support team often on the law enforcement side. And then of course, on the criminal side, there's mistakes, there's stupidity, there's clumsiness, there's panic, there's the sheer will to violence that can get really messy and violent and murderous. And so I just was interested by that, like the almostly irrationality of it, you know, like crimes aren't, I think we have this idea that crime is a sort of smooth experience, and that's a fantasy. It's actually a messy fight. And I wanted it to look that way a little bit.
Was Petra's character wearing heels in that second bank robbery?
She's wearing shoes that the heel breaks off.
Okay.
Yes.
I was
Yes.
like, she's running in
Yeah,
really tall shoes.
I know.
With a
It was
gun.
like boots, high boots, but she was,
Okay.
and I just think like she wasn't, I mean, the idea isn't that they're the smartest criminals.
Yeah.
They're just the most desperate, hungry criminals,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah, that was part
That
of
was a nice touch. That felt accurate to what we know of that character.
it. Yes, exactly.
How much time do we have left? Okay, we have a few more. Right in front here?
Oh, yeah.
In the, yeah.
I have two questions, actually. The first is about the movie. The second is a personal question, and you can decide if you want to answer one or both or none. About the movie, everything is based on close-ups, like very, very descriptive facial expressions that really depend on Nicole's face. So much of the story is told through that. Did you have Nicole in mind as you were?
Did I have Nicole in mind? You know, I didn't. I didn't actually initially think of anyone for the role. I was just sort of thinking of the character, and I happened to start sending the script out to a couple of agents that I knew, and she got the script. I didn't send it to her directly, and she just got in touch with me and just said, I really want to play this character. It really freaks me out, and I'm really scared about it, and I know that's why I should do it. And as soon as I met with her, I felt like there was just something like the wildness of an artist in her, and so I felt like she could tackle it.
And the second question, which is a personal question, is can you talk a little bit about your journey as a filmmaker and how you decided to be behind the scenes? But the bigger part about that is, where did this film take you in your journey of being a filmmaker?
That's such a good question. You know, I've always wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to make movies since I was, I don't know, 13 years old or something. but it took me a long time to make my first movie. I was about 31 when I finally got a first feature film made. I make movies really slowly. My process is slow. I don't jump into things easily, so I've only made 5 films. And I wish I'd made 10. I wish I'd made 15. So I'm always chasing this sense that I'm being chased a little bit by time or mortality or some messed up version of or notion of legacy. But this project particularly, there's something about it that is very much about being with a broken person, like spending a lot of time with a broken person. And I'm not gonna lie, that's hard for me. I've made movies and I've made work that kind of focus on that. And it's not where I want to live artistically all the time. I have a lot of work that will live there on my dance card, but I ultimately want to explore other frequencies. I want to see what joy and what hope might look like. Just haven't found the right vehicle yet, but someday.
Are you working on your next film? Is there something in the hopper?
Yeah, I have a bunch of films that I'm trying to push forward, and it's just a question of which one gets the money first. And it's just a hard time to get anything made, but I just keep pushing.
Well, fingers crossed, because I want to see your next film very badly. Do we have any more right in the corner here? Right there.
Thank you very much for making this. Do you know, when, do you run rehearsals with your actors? Specifically for, the action scenes, did you use stunt performers a lot, or was that a lot of Nicole Kidman doing her own stuff?
Nicole did, I would say, half and half. The action sequences did need a fair amount of planning, simply because we did have a mix of stunt performers and actors. And for instance, Tatiana did most of her own stunts. So that's Tatiana getting thrown around by Nicole. I mean, she was really open to that, but I was a little bit I don't know. I feel like you're about to really get injured. But she felt like it was important for her to do it. And so we rehearse, I would rehearse just general blocking on all of the other scenes, though Nicole personally doesn't love a long rehearsal process unless it's something that really kind of called for it. And for her, she felt like it was much more immediate and fresh to sort of be in character throughout the days and weeks that we were working, and then to just sort of show up, show me what she was going to do, and then we started shooting. A lot of times on other films, I made a film called The Invitation that was all in one house with a cast of between 10 and 14 people, and I rehearsed the entire thing from start to finish for 3 full days. So it just depends on the project. I tend to work a bunch of different ways.
Thank you.
Everyone in the audience seen The Invitation? Yeah, that movie is so good. That's another one with a all-time great ending. Your films always have these just banger endings. Do you, as you're making them, do you find the endings, or are you someone who has it
I
in your
feel
brain?
if you don't have the ending, you don't really have the movie. And so for me, it's I'm thinking, I mean, that's part of what made this movie kind of interesting to me, was that the ending and the beginning were linked in that way. And even just at the script early outline phase, when they were talking about the skateboarder in the background, wiping out with his group of friends, I had said to Phil and Matt, just so you know, I'm going to end the movie on the kid landing the trick. And they were like, oh, okay, that's good to know. And then they wrote that in just because I felt like that could be a sonic thing that could begin the movie and end the movie and sort of run through that sequence of her in the car like that. So yeah, endings are super important.
Do we have time for one more question or one more? Okay, who gets the last question? All the way over there. Yeah, your hand's been up.
Hello, thank you. So you spoke a little bit about being interested in different emotions like joy. Are you interested in working in particular genres or a particular genre? Are you more interested in the emotions without the constraint of a genre?
Yeah, so that's such a good question because like I think people imagine that I only want to do like literally genre films, action films, horror films, and I don't. I want to know what it is that I'm feeling when I'm reading the script, when I'm imagining it as a movie, when I'm shooting it, and when it's finally a movie, and then putting it in front of an audience. It's all about what can I guide myself and the audience toward feeling. And to me, that's why I do this work. And so weirdly, I find I keep feeling more from horror or from thrillers or from what we call genre films, but I'm wanting to kind of be open to other kinds of storytelling as well and flex different muscles.
So are we gonna get a rom-com next?
You know, it's so funny. So
They're
the
coming back.
rom-com,
They're
the
coming back.
rom-com might be the one thing I don't think I know how to do. It's funny. It's like I've got tropes and themes in my work, and that's like people throwing up,
Yeah.
you know, people beating the crap out of each other. Like, but I just don't know how a rom-com works for me.
I think you could have someone throwing up in a rom-com and it would
right.
work.
You're right.
I went on a date where I threw up. It happened. We still dated for like 3 months. So
Well, there you go.
You know, that's the meet cute right there. I want to thank you all for coming out. Karyn, I love your films, and her first film, Girl Fight, is the cover of the book. So the book wouldn't exist. Also, if you read her chapter and then look at the back of the book, you'll understand why that Valley Girl is at the back of the book. So thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to the
so
Frida
much.
staff.
Thank you.
This beautiful theater.
And can I just say one thing? Like, I've never been to this theater before, and it's just awesome that you have this theater and that it's showing repertory screenings, it's showing different kinds of movies, it's showing what's in the theaters currently. Support your local theater. This is how we should be watching movies. So thank you.
Yes.